My name is Melissa and this is my daughter Pippa, and we're at home in a little country town called Terang.
So my name's Chris. I am a nurse. I'm the Bob Skilton outreach nurse based at Royal Children's Hospital. My role is for supporting cancer care close to home for families here in Victoria.
Pippa was 3 and she was very lethargic, no energy, had large bruises on her legs that weren't going away, they were increasing, and very pale in complexion. I just assumed that she might have been lacking iron and needed some iron, so we went to the doctor, and then 5 o'clock the doctor rang and said, "You need to go to Melbourne, you have a very sick little girl."
Yeah, so Pippa was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia at a very young age. Her and a mum, single mum, country town, very small, lovely little town. You can imagine a diagnosis like that is nothing you'd ever expect. Upends the whole world. Moved to Melbourne with very little support.
From that moment, we were in hospital for a few weeks, and Pippa started treatment a couple of days later. And the whole treatment process was about 2.5 to 3 years.
Childhood cancer by nature is very rare, and it means we have to centralise everything to the big cities. Before we had options such as Sporting Chance's work, families would just relocate. So some families would move house, and that might be through the entire treatment, it might be through that period of surveillance, and certainly a lot of driving.
So she was in hospital after the initial diagnosis. She was in hospital for probably 2 weeks to get used to the treatment and stuff, and then depending on what cycle of the treatment she was on, it would depend on how often, but we needed to be within a 10 to 15 minute radius of the hospital so that we could get there quickly.
About 1 in 3 children that we see in the Cancer Centre do not live in Melbourne, and they live in regional, so it's actually quite a lot of families that we need to consider. So we did some mapping of families from border towns across New South Wales from where we are in Melbourne, and we found that children with leukemia, their treatment and their surveillance in what we could do locally saved them about 25,000 kilometres of driving. And let alone the social cost of missing school, families missing their usual sporting events or their local cultural events they need to get to, and having these 2 sets of bills, one in the city, one in the country.
It was a bit isolating, but we got through. We met some wonderful families where we were staying, so we were lucky that way. We had each other. Pippa made some friends, some good friends. About halfway through the maintenance phase of Pippa's treatment, one of the doctors in Melbourne actually said that there's a potential that Pippa could have some of her treatment in Warrnambool, and that took a lot of pressure off travelling because we live 3 hours away from Melbourne. So to know that we could do that, Pippa had started school as well, so being able to go to the hospital locally, we didn't have to pay for accommodation or travel or anything like that. We could go to our appointment and then I could come back to work and Pippa could go to school, and it was back to normal.
The 9 centres we have here will provide chemotherapy where we can. We do a lot of supportive care, transfusions, managing fever. So I engage with a lot of oncologists that come on the road with me with the Sporting Chance car, and also with paediatricians across regional Victoria to make sure that we can see these families at home, in their home environment, and be back there with their families.
Now she's 8 years old, in remission and kicking goals.
One of the signs of good healthcare, of a good health service, is how we look after our most vulnerable people in our community. And I think there's nothing more vulnerable than a young child dealing with a diagnosis of cancer. And when we can do that well with the support that we get from Sporting Chance, is a great outcome in the end.